Welcome to the Dangerous Soul Love Stories. The channel will bring you stories of strong bonds, cultural differences, passionate love, and unforgettable dramatic events. If you love interracial love stories and cinematic storytelling, then this is the place for you. Enjoy listening. Please subscribe to the channel to hear more great stories.
I did not expect the moment my life changed to start with a paper cup of burnt hospital coffee slipping from my hand. It was 3 a.m, the kind of hour where everything feels unreal, where your body moves on instinct because your mind is too tired to keep up. I had just finished a 12-hour shift, my feet aching, my eyes dry, my patience gone. I turned the corner too fast and suddenly I collided with someone solid. The coffee spilled across his shirt, dark stains spreading over fabric that probably cost more than my monthly rent. For a second everything froze. My breath caught. My fingers tightened around the empty cup. Then I looked up. And that was when I knew something was wrong. He did not react like a normal person. No frustration. No raised voice. Just stillness. Complete controlled stillness. His eyes settled on me, not angry, not surprised, just focused in a way that made the hallway feel smaller. Before I could say anything, men appeared behind him like they had been waiting just out of sight. Their presence shifted the air. One stepped forward, his voice low but sharp. "Apologize." It was not a request. I felt it in the way his hand hovered too close to my arm, in the way the hallway suddenly emptied as if everyone else sensed what I was only beginning to understand. These were not men you argued with. These were men you obeyed. My heart started pounding, loud enough I could hear it over the distant beeping of machines. I knew the smart move. Lower my head. Say sorry. Walk away. Forget his face. Forget this moment ever happened. That is how people survived encounters like this. But something in me pushed back, something stubborn and tired and done with being small just to make other people comfortable. I lifted my chin and met his eyes directly. It was an accident. My voice came out steady even though my pulse was racing. I am not apologizing for existing in a hallway. The man in front of me did not move, but the one beside him stiffened, his expression darkening like I had just crossed a line that did not allow a return. For a second I thought that was it. That this was how it ended. A mistake. A refusal. And then nothing. But the man I spilled coffee on did something no one expected. He raised a hand slightly and the others stopped. Just like that. No argument. No hesitation. Control that absolute does not need explanation. He looked at me again, longer this time, like he was trying to understand something that did not fit into his world. Then he stepped past me without a word. No threat. No warning. Just silence that lingered heavier than anything he could have said. I stood there, my hands still shaking, my breath uneven, trying to convince myself it was over. That I could go back to my shift, back to my life, back to something normal. But people like him do not just walk away. And later that night, when I heard his name whispered in a tone that carried both fear and respect, I realized exactly who I had refused to bow to. Jun-Ho Lee. The man who controlled things no one talked about out loud. The man people disappeared around. The man who did not forgive mistakes. And somehow instead of erasing me, he noticed me. So tell me, if the most dangerous man in the city suddenly starts paying attention to you, would you run? Or would you stand your ground and see what happens next? He showed up again the next night. I noticed him before anyone else did, not because he made noise, but because the air shifted in that subtle way it had the first time. People moved differently when he was around. Conversations softened. Eyes dropped. Even the machines seemed louder just to fill the silence he carried with him. I was charting patient notes at the nurse's station, trying to ignore the dull ache in my shoulders when I felt it. That awareness. That pressure. I looked up and there he was, standing at the end of the hallway like he had always been there. Same calm expression. Same unreadable eyes. Like the coffee never happened. Like I never happened. I went back to my work. Deliberately. If he expected a reaction, he was not going to get one from me. But I could feel it. His gaze did not leave. Not curious in a casual way. Focused. Measured. The kind of attention that made you feel like you were being studied instead of seen. 10 minutes passed. Maybe more. Then one of the nurses leaned in close to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know who that is?" I did. Or at least I knew enough. I shook my head anyway. Safer that way. She swallowed and glanced toward him before speaking again. "That is Jun-Ho Lee. People do not cross him. People do not even look at him unless they are told to. Her words sat heavy in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. I had already crossed him. And I was still here. He started coming in regularly after that. Not every night. Just enough to make it impossible to call it coincidence. He started coming in regularly after that. Not every night. Just enough to make it impossible to call it coincidence. Sometimes he stood in the hallway watching as doctors rushed past him, as patients were wheeled in and out, as life and death played out in real time without him interfering. Other times he would walk through the ward slowly, like he was observing something only he understood. The first few times the staff tried to pretend he was not there. But you can only ignore that kind of presence for so long. Eventually everyone adjusted. Conversations lowered when he passed. Movements became more careful. Even the doctors, people used to being in control, shifted slightly when he entered a room. Power recognizes power, and his was the kind that did not need to be explained. I kept my distance. Or at least I tried to. But distance means nothing when someone decides you are worth their attention. One night, I was finishing up a late round when I found him leaning against the wall outside a patient room, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. He did not look at me right away. He waited until I was close enough to feel the weight of his presence, then turned his head just slightly. "You work too many hours." His voice was calm, almost observational, like he was stating a fact that did not concern him. I paused, surprised more by the normalcy of the comment than anything else. People like him were not supposed to notice things like that. I shrugged and kept walking. People here do not have a choice. That was all I said. But I felt his gaze follow me again, sharper this time. The night everything shifted. It did not start with him. It started with a man being rushed into the emergency room, blood soaking through the sheets, his breathing shallow. Gunshot wound. Close range. The kind that usually does not make it through the doors alive. The team moved fast, voices overlapping, orders snapping through the air. I stepped in without thinking, hands steady, mind focused. This was what I did. This was what I was good at. Save what you can. Hold the line as long as possible. I did not ask questions about where he came from. That is not how this works. You treat the patient in front of you. Nothing else matters. But it did matter. I saw it in the way the room tightened when the man's face became visible. Recognition. Fear. Not from me. From others. Someone muttered something under their breath, something about affiliations, about territory. I ignored it. Always do. Until I felt it again. That presence. I turned my head just enough to see him standing at the doorway, watching everything unfold with that same controlled stillness. No panic. No urgency. Just observation. Like this was familiar to him. Like this was part of his world. We worked on the patient for what felt like hours but was probably less. Blood replaced. Pressure stabilized. Breathing secured. When it was over, when the man was no longer dying in front of us, the room exhaled all at once. I stepped back, pulling off my gloves, my hands finally starting to feel the strain of what we had just done. And that was when he spoke again. "You did not call the police." I looked at him, really looked this time, and I saw something different in his expression. Not curiosity. Not calculation. Something closer to respect. I held his gaze and answered simply. "It is not my job to decide who deserves to live." The words hung between us, heavier than anything else in that room. For the first time since I met him, he nodded. Not to his men. Not to anyone else. To me. A small movement, almost invisible, but it carried weight. Because people like him do not acknowledge others without reason. And in that moment something shifted. I was no longer just the woman who refused to apologize. I was something else. Someone he could not categorize easily. Someone who did not fit into the system he controlled. And that made me dangerous in a way I had not fully understood until now. I should have stepped back then. Created distance. Closed whatever door had just opened. But life does not give you that kind of clarity in real time. Instead, I found myself standing there, meeting the gaze of a man who could change the direction of my life without lifting a finger. And for the first time I realized something that should have scared me more than it did. I was not just on his radar anymore. I was part of the equation. The night of the gathering, I knew something was wrong the second I walked into the room. It was not loud. Not chaotic. The opposite. Everything was too controlled, too deliberate, like every person in that space had already decided how the night would end before it even began. I was not supposed to be there. That much was clear from the way conversations paused for half a second too long when I stepped in beside Junho, from the way eyes shifted toward me and then quickly away, like acknowledging me directly would break some unspoken rule. The room was filled with men who carried power like a second skin, men who did not need to introduce themselves because their names were already known in the right circles. And then there was me, a nurse who smelled faintly of antiseptic and exhaustion, standing in a room that was built on control and fear. I kept my posture steady, my expression neutral, but inside my instincts were screaming. This was not my world. Every part of me understood that. But I had already crossed the line the moment I did not apologize in that hallway, and there was no stepping back now. Junho did not say anything as we moved further into the room. He did not guide me. He did not explain. He simply existed beside me, and somehow that was enough to make space where there should not have been any. People adjusted around him without being told. That was the kind of power he had. Absolute. Quiet. Unquestioned. Until tonight. The man who changed everything did not look dangerous at first. Younger than most of the others. Well-dressed. Confident in a way that came from never being challenged. He was standing across the room surrounded by a small group, laughing about something that did not matter. But when his gaze landed on me, the laughter stopped. Not because he was intimidated, because he was curious. And curiosity in a room like this is never harmless. He said something to the people around him, low enough that I could not hear it, but I saw the way they glanced at me afterward, the subtle shift in their expressions. Recognition. Judgment. Amusement. He approached slowly like he had all the time in the world. No one stopped him. No one warned him. That told me everything. He was not just another man in the room. He was someone who believed he could say whatever he wanted and walk away untouched. He stopped a few feet in front of me, his gaze moving over me in a way that was not respectful, not even curious anymore. Dismissive. Calculating. Like he had already decided my value and found it lacking. You could hear a pin drop in that moment. Every conversation in the room faded into the background. This was no longer just a gathering. It was a test. So this is her. His voice carried just enough to reach the people closest to us. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just clear. I did not respond. I did not look away either. I had learned enough by now to understand that weakness is not always about fear. Sometimes it is about silence. He smiled slightly like my lack of reaction amused him. Then he said it. Replaceable. One word. Simple. Casual. But in that room it landed like a statement of fact. Like he was reminding everyone exactly where I stood in a world that did not make space for people like me. No one interrupted him. No one corrected him. That was the rule. You do not interfere unless it is your place to do so. And for a second I thought maybe Junho would stay silent too. That this was one of those moments where power chooses not to act because acting would cost more than it was worth. But then I felt it. That shift. Not in the room. In him. It was subtle, almost invisible if you were not paying attention. The way his shoulders straightened just slightly. The way his gaze hardened, not outwardly but enough that the air around us changed. Say that again and your entire family disappears. His voice was calm. Even controlled. The same way it always was. But there was something underneath it now. Not anger. Not emotion. Certainty. The kind that does not leave room for interpretation. For a heartbeat no one moved. Then someone laughed. Not the man in front of me. Someone behind him. Then another. The sound spread, light at first, then louder, like the room was releasing tension through disbelief. Because in their world, threats are currency. And most of them are empty. But Junho did not smile. He did not repeat himself. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at the man in front of me and waited. And in that waiting, in that silence that stretched just a second too long, I understood something that no one else in that room seemed to grasp yet. He was not bluffing. This was not posturing. This was not about ego. This was a line. And once crossed, there would be no undoing it. The man in front of me hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. Then he laughed too, louder this time, like he was proving something to everyone watching. He repeated the word, slower, clearer, like he was daring the world to respond. Replaceable. And just like that, the moment passed. Conversations resumed. Glasses clinked. The room exhaled. To everyone else it was over. Just another exchange of power that meant nothing beyond the walls of that room. But I saw his eyes. And I knew. It had already begun. It did not happen all at once. That is what people get wrong about power when it moves. They expect explosions. Chaos. Something loud enough to prove that a line has been crossed. But what Jun-ho did was quieter than that. And far more devastating. The first sign came before sunrise. I woke up to my phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand, the screen lighting up the dark room in sharp flashes. Messages. Notifications. Names I did not recognize. When I picked it up, my chest tightened. News alerts. Financial freezes. Emergency closures. At first it looked unrelated, like scattered incidents happening across different parts of the city. But then I saw the pattern. Every name. Every company. Every location. They all traced back to one family. The same one that had laughed the night before. By the time I stepped outside, the city already felt different. Subtle but undeniable. Businesses that had been open for years were suddenly closed. Their doors locked, windows dark, as if something had swept through overnight and erased them from operation. People stood in small groups on sidewalks, voices low, phones in their hands, trying to make sense of something that was moving too fast to understand. I walked past one storefront where smoke still lingered faintly in the air, the smell sharp and metallic, and I felt it settle in my chest. This was not random. This was deliberate. Every move precise. Every target chosen. I found him exactly where I expected. Not hiding. Not reacting. Sitting in a quiet office with floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out beneath him like something he could rearrange if he wanted to. He did not look up when I entered. He already knew I was there. Of course he did. You did this. My voice was steady, but I could feel something building underneath it, something I could not fully name. He leaned back slightly, his expression unchanged, like I had just commented on the weather instead of a coordinated collapse that had taken less than 24 hours. They were warned. That was his answer. No justification. No hesitation. Just fact. I stepped closer, my pulse picking up despite how hard I tried to stay controlled. This is because of me. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I did not take them back. I needed him to hear it. Needed him to acknowledge it. For the first time since I met him, he looked directly at me, not through me, not around me, but at me in a way that felt unguarded for a fraction of a second. Oh. His voice was quieter now, but somehow heavier. This is because they forgot the rules. The simplicity of it hit harder than anything else. Because to him this was not emotional. Not personal. This was correction. Enforcement. A system resetting itself because someone stepped out of line. But I had seen enough by then to understand the truth beneath his words. He had used me as the line. Used that moment, that insult, as justification to do what he had likely been preparing to do long before I walked into his life. This was not just protection. This was strategy. The realization settled slowly, like something cold spreading through my chest. You were going to do this anyway. It was not really a question. More a statement I needed to hear out loud. He did not deny it. He rarely did. They were weak. He said it like it explained everything. Like weakness was reason enough to erase an entire structure. The scale of it became clearer as the day unfolded. Calls came in. Not to me. To him. Reports delivered in calm voices that masked the magnitude of what was happening. Accounts frozen across multiple countries. Supply lines cut. Partnerships dissolved overnight as allies distanced themselves before they could be pulled under too. And then there were the ones who simply disappeared. No announcements. No headlines. Just absence. In a world like his, absence speaks louder than anything else. I stood there, listening, watching, trying to reconcile the man who had stood quietly in a hospital hallway with the one dismantling an entire family without raising his voice. You ever realize you are standing next to something far bigger than you understood? That was me. And for the first time, fear pushed through the control I had been holding on to. Not fear for myself. Fear of what it meant to be connected to him at all. The ripple effect did not stop with one family. That was the part no one had expected. Other groups started pulling back, reassessing alliances that had been stable for years. Meetings were cancelled. Agreements reconsidered. The balance that had held everything in place shifted, not violently but enough to make everyone pay attention. Jun-ho was no longer operating within the system. He was rewriting it. And that made him unpredictable. Dangerous in a way that power alone does not achieve. I turned back to him, searching his face for something that might ground this, something that might make it feel less absolute. Do you even care what this turns into? The question slipped out before I could stop it. He held my gaze, steady, unwavering, and for a moment I thought I might see doubt. Regret. Something human enough to soften the edges of what he had done. But there was nothing like that there. Only clarity. It already has. He said it like it was inevitable. Like the moment that word was repeated, everything that followed had already been decided. And that was when it hit me fully. This was never about one insult. It was never about one moment in a room full of men who thought power made them untouchable. It was about a system that had gone unchecked for too long, and a man who decided, for reasons that still did not make complete sense to me, that I was the point where it would break. I stood there, caught between something that looked like protection and something that felt like destruction, and realized there was no clean way out of this. Because once someone like him chooses you for any reason, you do not just walk away unchanged. The city did not go back to normal after that. It adjusted. Carefully. Quietly. Like everyone had agreed without speaking that something had changed and no one wanted to be the next example. Businesses reopened under different names. Alliances reformed but weaker, more cautious. People who used to speak with confidence now chose their words with precision. And at the center of all of it was Junho, not louder, not more visible, but heavier somehow, like his presence carried consequences no one could ignore anymore. Power had always been part of his world. Now it defined it completely. I tried to return to my life. To the hospital. To the rhythm of night shifts and steady routines that made sense. But nothing felt the same. Every hallway felt narrower. Every decision carried weight it did not have before. As I knew now. I had seen what happened when someone like him decided to act. And I could not unsee it. People looked at me differently too, even if they did not understand why. Like something about me had shifted just enough to make them hesitate. That is the thing about being at the center of something dangerous. Even if you walk away, it does not leave you. I found him one last time before I made my choice. Same office. Same view. The city stretched out beneath him, moving forward like nothing had happened, even though everything had. He did not turn when I walked in. He did not need to. You are leaving. It was not a question. I let out a slow breath, steadying myself before answering. I do not belong in your world. The words felt heavier than I expected, like I was closing a door I had never meant to open. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he nodded just once. No argument. No attempt to stop me. That was the part that surprised me the most. The man who controlled everything chose not to control this. I walked away without looking back. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Because staying would mean becoming something I was not sure I could recognize anymore. And maybe that is the truth no one talks about. Power does not just protect. Transforms. Sometimes into something better. Sometimes into something you never wanted to be. As I stepped out into the night, the air felt different, lighter but not free. Because a part of me understood that no matter where I went next, I would carry this with me. He started a war for me. That is what people will say. That is how they will remember it. But the real question is not about him. It is about choice. If someone could tear down an entire world just because you mattered to them, would you stay and stand beside that power? Or would you walk away before it changed you into something unrecognizable? If there is one thing I understand now, it is this. Not every kind of love is meant to be kept. Some of it arrives like a storm, powerful enough to change everything, but too dangerous to survive if you stay inside it. He chose me over power, over rules, over a system that had shaped his entire life. But I chose something different. I chose to remain someone I could still recognize when the world finally went quiet. So tell me honestly. If someone could burn everything down for you without hesitation, would you stand beside them or would you walk away before you became part of the fire?